I'm pressing play now in. Okay, now as you come join us. All right, so I think we can begin now. So welcome to another talk during those product management business analysis community Z days. The topic that we have presented for you right now is consulting mindset, tools, and frameworks for everyone. My name is Jan Mazurek, and I will have the privilege and pleasure of being your host today. Our speaker today, Alexandra Pitkevich, prior to becoming an EPAM blockchain lead, she spent 13 years at a major world consultancy firm where frequently served as a trusted technology advisor for big enterprises. Fun fact about our speaker, that she is an Aikido black belt and certified teacher. And funny enough, she learned how to apply Aikido principles in the consultancy job. You want to know how she does that? I listen to the presentation. Also, I encourage you to take advantage of our Community Z portal. Please take part in the discussion, raise any questions to our speaker today in the Q&A section, and at the end of the speech, I will address the most upvoted questions to our speaker. With that said, Alexandra, the stage is yours.
Hi, guys. So the stage is mine, and let's explore the topic. I do hope that after those 45 minutes, you will be happy to think slightly differently, to basically, I'm trying to implement the kind of the paradigm shift, because there are a lot of opinions about the consultancy, about the consulting services, about the consulting mindset. And for those who are still not here, I hope there would be a little bit of the learning, a little bit of true understanding what it is. And for those who are already there, I hope that I can put a little bit of light to the tooling and to a question how to do this job effectively. And you might be curious why I'm sitting here. Thanks to Jan, who already told that I spent quite some time of being consultant and working for the really huge consultancy and being privileged to learn from my peers and from my management. But I mean, that showed me that the consultancy approach and this mindset, it really helps you not only in a professional atmosphere, it also helps you in your real life. And I do believe that I will try today to tell you a story about this. So, but let's try to start from like very, very far away. I mean, you all have experience of starting a new and exciting project. You do your research, you plan well, you gather a good team, and you start to work. And then, somewhere along the way, things fall apart. Deadlines are missed. Deliverables don't live up to the expectations. Customers and bosses are dissatisfied, to say at least. It's awful. But why do so many projects which have such great potential end up as a failures? We don't have the possibility to have a conversation right now about that. And I probably I would like you to think about this and probably they put down somewhere, why? Why do you think the project fails? And when the project is considered to be a failure, basically, I think that a project becomes a failure when it does not deliver what was required within the agreed upon budget and time. However, in most cases, the stakeholders decide if the project was a success or failure based on their judgment and satisfaction of the outcomes. So, guess what? One way to almost guarantee the project failure is to begin work without clear project objectives and goals. After all, there is no way to know where you succeed or failed when you are not completely sure what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, becoming a consultant meant and still means to achieve the particular mindset based on the problem solving and communication and having a way of thinking and doing business that fosters the business relationships in practice. Whether the consultants come from inside or outside of the organization. So, as I already said, we would like to prevent the project failures. And we see that the most project failures are because of we simply don't know what we are trying to achieve. Why does it happen? Because the real life is something different from what we learned from the very, very beginning. I mean, you're going to the kindergarten, you go to school, and you're taught how to solve the simple tasks, which has an answer. Okay, 2 multiplied by 2, that would always be 4. And 5 multiplied by 5 would always be 25. And all our years at school, we are most likely taught of how to solve those type of equations. Basically, to find a right answer to the question. Then we come to the real life, and that's appeared to be a little bit different. And but normally also the student years on the youth, you started to realize that life is not consisting from the simple questions which has an answer. I can give you the best example. I mean, we all were facing last year, the terrible situation, and try to answer the question, what is the best approach for the pandemics? I mean, give it a thought. There is no answer. There is no proven answer. And that's actually where the consulting mindset starts to play. Majority of the problems, majority of the projects, majority of the challenges in this life, they do not have answer. And the only way we can approach that is to develop a process, develop the way we're looking for the best answer we can find. And again, the judgment and the success of the project is how best answer we found for this problem. And that's what's actually caused some thinking because try to imagine who in your life you consider to be a clever person. It's not the person who knows all the answers. Because normally the person who knows all the answers considered to be arrogant and probably intelligent, but you don't normally think that it's a clever person. You actually think at least I think that a clever person is a person who first is able to listen and to understand my problem and to able to think along the way, to find a solution or to find the way to find a solution to my problem. And then to communicate that effectively. So I'm able to digest that. We all know people who seems to be knowing all the answers or knowing what to do, but communicating that in a way you can just shut the door and walk away. So let's look what can be done in this atmosphere. Because first of all, we all want to be considered as a clever persons. And the second, we all want our projects to be successful. So let's look at the intelligent approach, not giving back the blunt answer, what is the best way, but doing something different, shifting from what to how. And typically, this process can be divided this thinking process can be divided to several important steps. We usually start from the problem understanding. We are trying to identify the problem, what we actually going to solve. Then we are coming with the hypothesis. We are thinking what may be solution, what could help. And that's where some structural thinking is applied. Then, then we are trying to analyze the application of our hypothesis to our problem. And then we're doing some research. We're collecting information. We're structurizing information. We're trying to basically digest and to prove our hypothesis. And when it seems to be proven or moving us to the steps towards where we want to be, we can think about the communications, about the producing the recommendations, and basically communicating to the people what would be the desired steps. So we can then let's look to this process with a little bit more details. If we are starting from the problem identification, like we're first trying to define the boundaries of the problem and then break that down into the component elements. And the concept of MISI, which is mutually exhaustive, well, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, is the basis of this process. While we are looking to the problem, we normally can see a bunch of the problems which are all tangled together. It looks like really intricate and tangled set of the problems. And while we are approaching the problem understanding, this MISI concept is helping us to divide this huge bunch, like huge intricate bunch, to the set of non-intersecting smaller tasks that allows to simplify the problem and plan the work, because in most cases, the complex problem can be reduced to a group of the smaller, simpler problems that can be solved individually. And here's the good example of MISI application to the real life. You probably can laugh, but think about that. That's actually how you digest the problem. And that's the MISI application for kids. And next one is for adults. Then, having reduced the problem to its essential components, you are ready to embark on the next step, which is framing that, forming a hypothesis as to its likely solution. By already knowing where your solution is, you eliminate a lot of paths that lead to the dead ends. Using an initial hypothesis to guide your research and analysis will increase both the efficiency and effectiveness of your decision making, because it provides you and your team with the problem solving roadmap that will lead you to ask the right questions and perform the correct analysis to get to your answer. A good hypothesis will also save you time by pointing out potential blind allies much more quickly and allowing you to get back to the main issues if you do down the wrong path. So the next, your next step would be to structure the problem and to apply various ways of arranging things. Like you understand the problem, then you structure that, and then you can come to the analysis. And that's the true piece of like thinking art. Basically, you have to perform that. Basically, you are looking to the questions which you have to ask in order to prove or disapprove your hypothesis. When your time and resources are limited, you don't have the luxury of being able to examine every single factor in detail. Instead, when planning your analysis, figure out which factors most affect the problem and focus on those. You can drill down the core of the problem instead of picking apart each and every piece. In most situations, achieving a scientific level of your management decision or your problem solving is not always productive. So like your first steps in designing your analysis, you normally should figure out what not to do, where not to go. And as your next step, you should decide which analysis are quick wins, easy to complete. And that's the common practice. You're basically looking, okay, this we don't do. This is a quick wins. Let's accomplish that, and it will get us somewhere. And and then you will end up with the rest where you need to play with that. where you need to do the research and try to structurize and basically combine things. Normally, that's the way where you are looking to your project data. It might be your requirements, your gap analysis. There are a lot of tools which are helping you to structurize your data on a different ways. And normally, while doing that, you come up with the like you can see some correlations. You can see some obvious decisions or some easy to take decisions, and like one by one, like peeling the onion, you're coming to the core of the problem, and it's appeared to be like, but looking from a different angle, structurizing on a different way, you like one moment will come to the solution which looks like it will help. And that's basically the structuring way. I mean, structuring is like looking to the problems from different angles and arranging the data you have on the different ways. And well, with a plan of action of what to research, you need to make sure that you do not reinvent the wheel. And 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 using the tooling, and I will come to that stage, is actually helpful. And then while coming with like good analysis and good way to assess the application of your hypothesis to the problem, you basically are able to evaluate where you are. And that's probably the important moment in your structured thinking. And once you have your analysis finished, you need to interpret that, because well, numbers or data, they don't say anything. You have to figure out the story behind the messaging, like behind the message you want to communicate. And at this stage, first comes to the process of the understanding of data, piecing together, and yeah, you can do that yourself. You can work with the team, and the story the data is telling you, and the steps you should take based on that story. And the second comes assembling of your findings into the like clear to the externals of the thinking process and connected to your previous goals. The key message that includes the course of the actions and thinking in your organization that should be tied to what your client or what like the consumer of your thinking feels and thinks. And the interpretation of the data should lead to the story and should give enough support to your story. And basically when you build this the storytelling, you're ready to communicate that, but don't come like fresh to your stakeholders. Probe that, try that prior your final meeting, try to your final communication. That's called pre-wire. It's basically, you do have normally in a project or in a stakeholder board, people who supports you, who help you in your thinking. Check your story with them. And then when you feel that it will be well accepted, then you can start communicating that to your main stakeholders. And here, start with the conclusion. Start with like connect the message, like expose the message, and then support that with your story. Support that with the way to do the decision making. And basically, to succeed here in like the final step on our consulting exercise is, well, when you really need to speak on a language which your client understands, and you need to bring the message which is prepared message, and which brings a story which touches their needs. And then we are moving to like, well, currently we are at a step where I hope you understand what is actually the mindset and the way to approach the problems from the consulting point of view, and the basic steps you need to do. Like, remember, identify the problem, uh, analyze, structuralize, communicate. And then a lot of people may be thinking, okay, that seems to be logical, but how? And here the art starts. And here we are approaching the second part of my speech, which are the consulting tools. And where we as a consultants, we love the best practices. And why do we do so? And what are those best practices? And that's simply the common way how consultants do the things. Basically, what it can be considered the same, good or bad. First of all, well, let's see the good side. Best practices, they're, they're best and well-known paths, basically because they're market tested. Because many of these best practices have been around for years, and clients have a sense of comfort that they're following a well-worn path. You don't have to read the most recent articles from the Harvard Business Review to know that like Toyota management system for lean production still works today. I mean, and they're repeatable. Consulting firms work with so many clients that they see that works and what does not. Clients think that they are unique, but a lot of the back office functions and more like the different. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel or mandate process. Better just to follow the trails what are already here. And the usage of the best practices that saves time and saves your time. That means that you are becoming cheaper for the client, which means that you're becoming more preferred, and that makes your work effective. And at the same time, the best practices are like powerful telescopes. They are like the client want insights into what competitors do, what other similar firms do, and they want to know what are they doing and how. And that's a fine line between best practices, benchmarking, competitive intelligence, but the uh, but the basic conformist tendency is the same. Show me what other people's doing. And having access to the best practices, mm, it really helps you, to transfer the generic knowledge between the clients. You are normally serving the number of similar clients within the industry. You are specializing either in industry, either in technology. And the way of applying workable things to the different companies, it actually helps you and helps them a lot. So those best practices, that's something which works and which allows you to see further what will be, because so many people work this path, you know what would be. But the best practices have a lot of danger. I mean, this cartoon is not there. Common opinion towards the consultancy services is some expensive and arrogant person will tell me what I need to do, not even knowing what I'm doing. And there are a lot of, conservatism, of a lot of arguments towards using the consulting services, because because of some bad applications of that, and because of, again, the common thinking that that's a lot of companies saying, please don't apply your copy paste technologies. I'm unique, I'm not the others. At the same time, we all know that they are. And so that's kind of the art of applying the best practices. But let's see what those are. And remember our process. we identifying problem, structurizing problem, analyzing problem, and then we are communicating outcomes. How do you think where we need tools? And I guess most of you are thinking that, yeah, indeed, we need it everywhere because it's simply comfortable to use some proven and some well-structured mechanisms which frame your thinking, which help you to do your job. And here we are coming with the topic of the consultancy frameworks. They structurize your thinking. They guide you from thinking process. And those are the things which can tell you what to do first, what not to do the first. Consultants are structured thinkers. What they may not have as like the very good intuition. That's actually good to have that. But if not, you can look at the topic using a framework, and you can apply the tool and guide which will guide you step by step, and that will recollect in you the structural way of identifying problem, either structurizing or analyzing that. And well, clients are often surprised to see how comprehensive and seemingly authoritative the end results of the consulting approach can be. Like basically the typical opinion or thoughts that it's like only a few weeks or months ago, the set of were the young professionals were seemingly not knowing a lot about the business coming to the picture, and now they are giving us pretty credible advices. And that's the result of the using frameworks. And the frameworks, like when you have to outline something, presentation, argument, journey, it liberates your mind to focus on the details without the fear that you will wander too far off the path. You know your boundaries. Consultants don't necessarily know the answers, but they often know where to look. Some call it best practices, some call it common sense, some call it emotional intelligence. The only way to make sense of a glut of data is to use a mental model to organize your thoughts and observations. And that's where tools come into place. And without some way to organize your ideas, your PowerPoints would be read like a bullet and list of the factors. Where the client has to guess and extrapolate what is the word you're trying to say. It's painful. And yeah, the tooling, the frameworks, they doesn't have to be complicated or even unique. Find a team, graphic, or set of the words. It's like what the good tooling will help to go you through the path, and will simplify what you do on your daily basis. And one of the best and probably well-known tools, those are the canvas. And I'm pretty sure that most of you have seen that in your daily work. It helps, like you actually know how helpful it is to talk to your client using the canvas when you need to identify the problem, where you do need to identify what we need to do. That's not always a problem, it's sometimes a goal. And basically, what I'm showing here on the two, the value proposition canvas and business model canvas. And you know, the value proposition helps you to understand what are your client segments, what do they need, or what is your product and what it brings to your client segment. And the business model canvas helps you to do the next step, to plot these ideas of who you're going to serve with what, with some initial thinking of how. And as you can see, okay, you can write that like it's doing like interviews and then write a long Word documents describing that. But to have a structural approach, it gives you clear thinking and it gives your client a clear understanding what are they trying to achieve, and gives the first glimpse of how. And then, like I've already mentioned, me-see concept, and we're still looking to the problem identification. And okay, if you are not creating the service or you're creating the product, well, there are other ways how to assess your problem. And as I already said, that's the way how to cut elephant into the pieces. I mean, how to disassemble your problem towards the smaller, I would say, smaller and the not intersecting ideas. And there are many ways of how you can do that. And again, if I would be speaking with you and was like, and will be able to get into the conversation, I will ask you, what are the typical areas you can structurize any problem? But yeah, I cannot do the real conversation, so I will give you some ideas. You can structurize that on internal and external, and that's mainly used while you're structuring information surrounding an entity. You can use quantitative and qualitative realms, and that's particularly useful when you do evaluation. Very well known, costs and benefits, and that's commonly used in decision making. Cause and effect, where you're analyzing effect, before versus after. That's frequently used for evaluating the effectiveness of actions or levers. And probably uh, probably very very universal and very applicable to almost every problem is people, process, product. And by decombining your question or your issue or your problem to those non-intersecting groups, that provides you, the understanding of the problem, the structural approach, and the way to communicate that. And clients are actually not very good in that. They normally don't know all the answers, and that's basically that caused them to the trouble. And when you think like, well, they're wise people, they simply don't have time. They have the daily operations. They have daily tasks, and they are normally distracted of this way of structural thinking. And you are being a consultant, you paid for that. You have this nice luxury to sit, think, and digest the problem and structurize the problem and apply, as I say, me-see technology to that. Then like another way and another framework to approach the problem is gap identification. That's actually the obvious idea. And again, I believe that you all know this technique and you all have been applying that in your projects. Gap analysis, it shows you the objectives. It shows you current state and the factors. That's exactly what it sounds like. That's figuring out how far you are from the particular goal or target. Consulting firms do this all differently. You can see example on a screen. It takes many formats, but it's super common. In fact, I can think of any project where we didn't include at least one gap analysis somewhere. It's nothing fancy. That's many years in practice, and it's one of the best practices. It sounds official, but you all know it's a common sense. But the application of that harder than it sounds, and because of a lot of the reasoning, are first you have a challenge of assessing those gaps because you're looking like, well, the first is to distinguish between urgent versus important. And that's because of this, approach of the firefighting, and where you see the urgent need to do something instead of stepping back and thinking what actually the gap towards the real solution, not towards like plastering what we have, like which is falling apart. Then the second challenge and the second question while you're doing the gap analysis is to uh, really understand what's the question. What's the like uh, what's the actual gap? We're doing gap analysis between where we need to be and where we are now. It's first not always clear where we are now, and that supplies some intelligence to understand that and to collect this information. And the biggest challenge is to formulate where we would like to be. What does good look like? And typically, like, remember, all three challenges are connected. All this firefighting approach, the real good, typically consultants set two frames for gap analysis, like long-term and short-term goals. And short-term, those are the the low-cost fixes. The medium-term, that's optimizing for the future, not for today. It's probably not the best for today's situation. That can cause immediately more work right now, but being applied structurally, it will solve the problem. And then the next step, like, well, you identified the problem, then there's a question, now what? How to close the gaps? But we will speak about that a little bit later. Then moving to the next tool, and that's the maturity model. And here we are already, bridging the problem. Like, so far we were speaking about the problem identification. With the maturity model approach and the maturity model framework, we are kind of moving towards like approach for the solutioning, because we are like, well, first of all, that's definitely identification. We are like building the model, and we are describing this model as a set of the steps which will increase your approach towards the goals, the maturity model. And we are also plotting the current state of the company, of the process, of the situation on this maturity model. So that's the bridge between understanding what the problem is and the ways what to do, because you're actually building the steps which are more mature that you are now. You're already applying some thinking towards what you need to do, because that's actually visualizing the path. And that's a really common tool. Again, like, so far, I'm not telling you anything new. I'm just putting the structure around that and basically naming the tools. As I already said, the maturity model is a common tool which leads the client and which explains the client maturity in a number of areas, and points out the areas of the improvement. That's simple, but the things frequently look simpler than they are. But that's really good stuff. Because it gives you example. It gives you example of the good. It gives you a way to evaluate where you are in your process. And yeah, it can be like, I do have two examples for you, and they look pretty similar, but yeah, they don't have to look like CMMI maturity model. That's just one of the examples. It can be a table, that can be, as you see, the chart, that can be also a surface. where you really have like the different aspects of your functioning, and those different aspects of the functioning, they plot on a surface, and each of the attributes have its own maturity. In this case, you will have the 3D model. And as I already said, that's we are bridging now the problem identification and tools which are used for problem identification to the structurizing the problem. And here we are coming to the another well-known tool, RASI. And RASI is abbreviation. You should be knowing that. Oh, sorry, that's still not there. That's R stays for responsible, A accountable, consultant, and informed. And this is a tool which consultants use on any project which requires clear definition of roles and communication and description of the new process. When you have more than a handful of people involved, it's very easy to get confused and make incorrect assumptions of who is doing what. And the confusion leads to the frustration. And that leads to the lack of the adoption and then to the failure of the project. That's a simple tool. Well, to apply that, you first need to put all the stakeholders on one side of the table, and then you have to list the activities which you need to ownership on another side. And then you are filling the table, and you are typically starts with A, where the accountable person who is the owner of the process. It's the person who has the who has to make sure it's done. And at the same time, that's the person who will suffer the most and who would be asked if that's not achieved. And that's always better to have only one A. While R, those are the people who will do the hard work of making the change happen. And that's okay to have more than one A, like more than one R, because well, you simply can have like the complex problem or complex action where a number of people are working, where a lot of people are working, where you even have like subsets of the people working. So the rule of the thumb, one A, it can be multiple R's, but at the same time, don't put R's where the people do not need to work in that. In this case, you have like the next step will be to add C's, and those are the parties who is consultant. And here that's wise to be selective. If you add too many parties to be consultant, it will be bureaucratic nightmare. The purpose of C's is to drive action. It's not to having committees and spending time on meetings. Put C's only where that actually can bring a value to the process. And a simple one, R's, they look at the least important, but the communications and the projects are always considered to be a challenge. Make sure that everybody who needs to know about the process or about the actions is in a list. And like all the people who needs like to be emailed, to have the status updates, who are not actually like handy on the issue, but needs to know their eyes. Yeah, I would like to spend a couple of minutes on a very simple example of the RASI. I'm very simplified. You can see the RASI for the very well-known book. It's a book by Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. And basically, you all remember the situation. You have a ring which needs to be brought to the Mount Doom. And the actions which needs to be done to accomplish that, those is, well, first of all, we know that it's necessary to destroy the ring. But first of all, that's necessary to decide, because like, remember in the book, there's quite some thinking of what to do with that. Then the nice approach would be to build the group, to understand who is going to do the action, And then actually the main part of delivering the ring to the Mount Doom. And there is some additional task to that, because we all know that the world is complex and there would be parties who are preventing us from destroying the ring. And so somebody should do an important job of distracting the parties. And again, very, very simplified. I do have 5 participants in a whole story. We have Frodo as the main character of the book, and we have his friend Sam, Samuel Ganji. And we have Gandalf, remember, the magician who was great become white. And we have 2 other important people, Aragorn, and honestly, I'm using him basically there are already like Legolas and a dwarf there, but yeah, let's say that's Aragorn just for the simplification and to fit into the screen. And we have Elrond, the king of elves, and then let's see like the example of Rasi. Well, first of all, we are looking for Ace. And ultimately, we have Gandalf, who is responsible for all of this, like who is accountable for this. He is basically protecting this world. And that's his accountability. He would suffer the most. And he's also the most mightiest person here. So he's accountable to deciding what to do, of creation of the fellowship, and he's also accountable for getting the ring to Mount Doom. And then we have people who are responsible, I would say people, elves, creatures who are responsible for that. And you can see the R's there. Like to decide, Gandalf is working together with Elrond, who does a lot, who does research, like I remember the book, the first part of that. And there are also parties which are consultant. And in this case, those are the Aragorn and Frodo. Remember, they were asked. And Sam, which was just informed about that. And then you can see the same for the creation of the fellowship. And while we are speaking about the getting a ring to the Mount Doom, while Gandalf is accountable for that, he doesn't do that himself. Like the party does that. And the most responsible person here is Frodo. He is the ring bearer. And there are other parties who are consultant, and the Elrond stays home. He just informed about what is happening. Remember, he had like birds and something who were informing them. And the last but not least, remember this distracting party. As you can see here, we don't have A in this row because that's auxiliary task. That's a supporting task, and we have responsible, like we have number of responsible people here, but we don't have the accountable one. And that's doable. And if you will see the whole story, that's how it happens. But yeah, we're spending too much time on Rasi, which a lot of people already know. So let's move forward. And here we are at a nice, like typically consultancy screen. And I would say, what the typical situation where we need to structuralize a problem. Remember, I was saying you have to think about that somehow. You have to push certain structure in something which is not really well obvious. And here I would say consultants use buckets. And it may sound pedestrian and unsophisticated, but it's harder than it looks. When you are trying to crack a complex problem, inevitably you will start to group things. Buckets, like consultants use buckets. Structuring problem forces you to organize your thoughts. And that reflects what your key message will be. It is a first step in turning data into insights. And I will give you, like, while you are thinking what those buckets can be, I will give you some examples. You can bucket by time. You can bucket by function. You can also bucket by the root cause. That's the playing with the data. You have the data and you are grouping that and see what matches what and what follows what. And yeah, I give you only 3 examples. They can be much more. And well, I deliberately put this picture here because you can see how this bucketing can be, like how complex can this bucketing be. That's the very well-known example. I think it's from McKinsey, and that shows like how the structure of the shareholder value is decomposition. And that's basically, you know, just applying the structure, appearing with the structure, it gives you the ideas. You can, like, what, later on having this presentation, you can meditate on that. It gives you a lot of interesting insights, but that's basically what consultants do. And try to think how they come up with that. I mean, they had the long Excel sheet where they were just like, you see these colored items, they were just blunt without a color, those the values which hundreds of people expressed as maybe a value. Normally the data are results of the interviews. And then try to think like how to come up with the structure, how to merge the data, how to group that. And yes, that was the usage of the buckets. And we are now in a realm of the problem structuralization. And here that's probably a tool which not everybody knows, but I'm sure there are the people who guess that. And well, first of all, I'm sorry, but that's the ugly acronym. It's called CPOC. But it's a useful way to think through the problem. Clients often present consultants with the complex process and seemingly don't have a start and finish. They go on and on. And they are interrelated processes, and it feels like an ugly Excel formula full of nested if-then statements. And the more you dig, the more you uncover. And sometimes the best thing is stop digging. Take a step back and think through the problem. Untangle the problem in a more structured way. Figure out what sits outside the process. What is client really asking for? What comes before the process and what comes after the process? And this supplier input process output customer, again, CPOC, that brings one example of that. This is a diagram, what can be drawn out from the left to right, that suppliers provide inputs to a process, which in turn provides output to customer. It is a simple daisy chain of the activities that the real scope of the project is. Middle area. So the process in the middle is what you are after. The stuff of the left, supplier and inputs, and on the right, its outputs the customers are not really under your control or potentially out of the scope. Focus on the middle part. And CPOC actually applies to any process where suppliers and the customers. It can be business to consumer. It can be business to business. And yeah, let's think about the examples. Business to consumer, for example, producing a cleaning product or producing something. Business to business, it can be internal product design. It can be sales support. And in all of this, remember, you have input, output, and a process in the middle. And if you detangle, like if you specify, and if you describe well who inputs and outputs, you will have a nutshell of your process. And you would be able to concentrate on those steps and activities which are carried out to basically to do the core, to transform inputs to outputs.
Apologies to interrupt you for a second, Alexandra. Just wanted to let you know that we have only 3 minutes left in the in this stream. Unfortunately,
terribly. I'm always trying to speak more than it is. But then I will go very swiftly because it's actually the last tool which I'm going to show, and that's the mic, and that's a great consultancy tool. And you see, I don't have now like the sign of which side of the consultancy process it covers, because it covers all the processes. It's basically define the problem, measure measure the gap. Remember gap analysis? It can be inside, and then analyze factors, and then improve. Remember, closing the gaps, and then control. Basically, you had measures, then you need to take these measures and then to compare. And that's basically the good example. And I'm sorry, I wouldn't go for all the steps, but I would better move towards the conclusion of what I had said today, as we have the last minute. And basically, remember, the mindset, the proper mindset, and probably the most important thing which I said now is a consultancy approach, as not to giving the answer of what needs to be, but how we can find the proper solution, how we can evaluate that, how we can get to this desired state. From the blunt answer, we know everything. Remember, life is complex. You don't know, and nobody knows, but you can plot the way how. Then apply the right process. Remember, identify the problem, structurize, analyze, come up with the right outputs. And then apply the tools. Tools will help. And there are a lot of tooling. I didn't have time to get you through all the frameworks, but you will get a presentation and you can look more and you can pick up what is necessary for your particular goal, particular process, particular area of your consultancy applicability. And I'm done.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you for sharing with us information about the frameworks and the tools for the consulting mindset. If anyone would have any questions to our speaker today, please go to the Communities at portal and write your questions over there. And Alexandra, I would greatly appreciate if you could provide a moment of your time to go to that portal as well and answer any questions of our participants today. For now, cautious of the time, we have in a few minutes, we start with new topics. So I encourage everyone on today's Communities and Business Analysis Days to join other presentations, other speeches. Alexandra, for now, I thank you so much for this. It was a great, interesting topic for many of us, including myself, who is considering consulting as the next step in the career. So greatly appreciated.
Thank you. That was a pleasure. And I promise that we'll answer all the questions. And also the people who know how to contact me, you can just ask personally. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wishing you all a great day. Please stay healthy, stay happy, stay safe, and speak to you.